The wind screamed across the frozen mountains like an angry beast. Snow fell so thick that Minji could barely see her own hands in front of her face. She pulled her worn coat tighter around her body and kept walking. The cold bit at her cheeks and nose, but she did not turn back. Minji lived alone in a small cottage at the edge of Snow Peak Village. She was a healer who made medicine from plants and herbs. The villagers came to her when they were sick, and she always helped them, even when they could not pay. Today, she needed to find frostberries. Old man Hyunwoo had a terrible cough, and only frostberry tea could help him. The planet Hanseong was a cold world, far from the warm center of the Celestial Empire. Dragons ruled the entire galaxy, and they had ruled for 10,000 years. Humans lived under their control, working in their factories, farming their lands, and following their laws. Dragons could fly between the stars using their magic. Humans could only dream of such power. Minji did not like the Empire's ways. Dragons treated humans like servants, like animals. But she kept her thoughts to herself. Speaking against the Empire meant death. So she lived quietly, helped her neighbors, and tried to bring a little kindness into the cold world. The storm grew worse. Even the dragon soldiers who usually patrolled the mountains had gone back to their warm barracks. Only a fool would be out in weather like this. Minji smiled a little. Maybe she was a fool, but Hyunwoo needed his medicine. She climbed down into a deep ravine where frostberries grew on the sheltered rocks. The wind was quieter here, blocked by the high walls of ice and stone. Minji began picking the small blueberries, placing them carefully in her basket. Then she heard something strange. It was a sound like breathing, but deep and slow. Each breath sounded like wind moving through a cave. Minji stopped picking berries. She listened carefully. The sound came from deeper in the ravine, around a bend in the ice. She should go home. She had enough berries. The smart thing was to leave. But Minji had never been good at doing the smart thing. Something was hurt. Something needed help. She could not just walk away. Minji followed the sound. She walked carefully over the ice, holding onto rocks to keep from falling. The ravine turned sharply, and then she saw them. 2 dragons lay on the frozen ground. They were huge, bigger than any dragon Minji had ever seen. One had golden scales that sparkled even in the dim light. The other had silver scales that shone like starlight. Ice covered their bodies. Frost grew on their wings. Their eyes were closed. Minji's heart pounded. These were not the young dragons who served as soldiers. These dragons looked ancient. Their scales had patterns she had never seen before. Their horns curved in ways that seemed impossible. They looked like creatures from old stories, from the time before the Empire. She should run. She should tell the dragon authorities. Hiding dragons was against the law. But as she stood there, the golden dragon's eye opened just a little. It looked at her. In that moment, Minji saw something she never expected to see in a dragon's eye. She saw pain. She saw fear. She saw a silent plea for help. The eye closed again. The dragon's breathing became weaker. Minji made her choice. She ran back to where she had left her hover sled. It was a simple machine, old and rusty, but it still worked. She pulled it to where the dragons lay. The sled was meant to carry supplies, not creatures as big as houses. But Minji would find a way. She worked for hours. First, she dug the golden dragon free from the ice using a small shovel she kept on the sled. Then she used ropes to pull the dragon onto the sled. The dragon was so heavy that the sled's engine groaned and smoked. But it held. She made the journey back to her cottage. The trip that normally took 20 minutes took over an hour. The sled moved slowly with the dragon's weight. Minji had to stop many times to rest and to make sure the dragon was still breathing. When she reached her cottage, she pulled the dragon inside. Her home was small, but she managed to fit the golden dragon in her main room. Then she went back for the silver one. The storm was even worse now. Minji could barely see anything. Her hands were numb from the cold. Her legs shook with exhaustion. But she kept going. She would not leave the second dragon to die. By the time she got both dragons into her cottage, the sun was setting. Her small home was now filled with 2 giant dragons. There was barely room for Minji to move. But she did not rest. She built up her fire until it roared in the fireplace. She brought out every blanket she owned and covered the dragons. She heated water and used warm cloths to gently clean the ice from their scales. She made hot soup from her winter supplies and carefully dripped it into their mouths. All through the night, Minji worked. She burned all her fuel to keep the fire going. She used her best medicines, the ones she was saving for emergencies. She talked to the dragons softly, telling them they would be okay, that they were safe now. As she worked, she wondered who these dragons were. Why were they frozen in the mountains? Why did they look so different from other dragons? And why did the golden dragon look at her with such intelligence, such depth? Outside, the storm finally ended. The night grew quiet. Minji sat on the floor between the 2 dragons, too tired to move. She had done everything she could. Now she could only wait and hope. The golden dragon's scales felt warm now. The silver dragon's breathing was stronger. They might live. Minji smiled, even though she knew she had probably broken many laws tonight. Even though she knew that if the Empire found out, she would be punished. She had seen living beings in need, and she had helped them. That was what mattered. That was what made her human. As sleep finally took her, Minji did not know that she had just changed the fate of the entire galaxy. She did not know that these dragons were legends brought back to life. She did not know that by morning, the Emperor's soldiers would surround her home. She only knew that she had done the right thing. And for Minji, that was always enough. Minji woke to the sound of movement. Her eyes opened slowly. Every muscle in her body hurt from the hard work of the night before. For a moment, she forgot where she was. Then she remembered everything. She sat up quickly. The golden dragon was moving. Its massive head lifted from the floor. One eye opened, then the other. They were the color of the sun, bright and warm. The dragon looked around the small cottage, then its gaze settled on Minji. She held her breath. This was a dragon. Dragons ruled the galaxy. Dragons could kill her with one breath of fire. But Minji did not move. She looked into those golden eyes and waited. The silver dragon stirred next. Its movements were slower, more careful. When its eyes opened, they were like moonlight, soft and pale. Both dragons looked at Minji. Neither of them spoke. They just watched her. Then Minji heard something that made her blood run cold. Outside her cottage, she heard the sound of boots on snow. Many boots. The heavy footsteps of soldiers. She stood up and went to her window. What she saw made her stomach sink. Soldiers surrounded her home. They wore the black armor of the Emperor's Imperial Guard. There were at least 50 of them, maybe more. They carried plasma rifles and energy shields. At their center stood a tall dragon in commander's armor. Minji recognized him. Commander Daehoon. He was known throughout the region as a loyal soldier who always followed orders. He had served the Emperor for over 300 years. Someone knocked on her door. The sound was loud and sharp. "Open the door," a voice commanded. "This is Commander Daehoon of the Imperial Guard. We know you have dragons inside. Surrender them now." Minji looked back at the 2 ancient dragons. They were watching her. The golden dragon tried to stand, but it was still too weak. The silver dragon made a low sound, like distant thunder. She could give them up. She could open the door and let the soldiers take them. That would be the safe thing to do. The smart thing. She would probably only be punished lightly for helping injured dragons. But Minji thought about how the golden dragon had looked at her in the ravine. She thought about how these ancient creatures had been left to freeze and die. She thought about what was right. She opened the door. Commander Daehoon stood on her doorstep. He was tall, even for a dragon, with dark red scales and cold black eyes. Behind him, soldiers pointed their weapons at her cottage. "I am Minji," she said quietly. "What do you want?" "You know what we want," Daehoon said. "Someone in your village reported strange energy readings last night. Dragon energy. Ancient dragon energy. We scanned your cottage. You have 2 dragons inside. They were dying, Minji said. I found them frozen in the mountains. I brought them here to help them. Do you know what you have done? Daehoon asked. His voice was hard. Those are not ordinary dragons. We have identified them from their energy patterns. They are Taeyong and Hana, the twin dragons of dawn. Minji shook her head. I do not know those names. Of course you don't. Your kind is not taught true history. Daehoon stepped closer. 10,000 years ago, those 2 dragons challenged the Emperor's ancestor for control of the galaxy. They claimed that all species should be equal. They wanted to give humans power. They were defeated and sentenced to eternal frozen sleep. They should have stayed frozen forever. But they are alive, Minji said. Yes. And that is a problem. Daehoon looked at her carefully. The Emperor wants them back. He wants them returned to their prison. And he wants to know who freed them. I freed them, Minji said. I found them and I saved them. No one else was involved. Daehoon seemed surprised by her honesty. You admit this freely? Yes. They needed help. I helped them. That is all. That is treason, Daehoon said. Harboring enemies of the Empire. The punishment is death. Minji felt afraid, but she did not show it. Then I will face that punishment. But these dragons stay here until they are strong enough to choose their own path. Some of the soldiers laughed. A human protecting dragons. It seemed like a joke to them. Daehoon did not laugh. He studied Minji with his dark eyes. He had fought in 100 battles. He had seen countless enemies. But he had never seen someone like this. She was small and weak. She had no weapons. She had no power. But she stood in front of him without fear. You would die for creatures you do not even know, he asked. I would not let innocent beings be taken back to torture, Minji said. That is what your frozen prison is. Torture. If you want them, you will have to go through me. Inside the cottage, Taeyong managed to stand. His legs shook, but he held himself up. Hana stood beside him. They were still weak, but they could fight if they needed to. One blast of dragon fire would destroy all the soldiers. But they did not attack. They watched Minji. They listened to her words. Something about this human was different. Something about her reminded them of why they had fought the Emperor's ancestor so long ago. Daehoon raised his hand. The soldiers readied their weapons. I give you 1 hour, he said to Minji. 1 hour to think about your choice. Surrender the dragons, or we will take them by force. If you resist, you will die. If the dragons resist, we have orbital cannons that can destroy this entire village. Think carefully. He turned and walked back to his command post. The soldiers stayed in position, surrounding the cottage. Minji closed the door and leaned against it. Her hands were shaking now. She had just threatened a dragon commander. She had just defied the Imperial Guard. She turned to look at Taeyong and Hana. They were both standing now, looking at her with those incredible eyes. Why did you do that? Taeyong asked. His voice was deep and warm, like summer thunder. You do not know us. We are strangers to you. You needed help, Minji said simply. That is enough. Hana moved closer. Her silver scales caught the light from the fireplace. Do you understand what you have done? You have made yourself an enemy of the Emperor. Your life is over. Maybe, Minji said, but I made my choice. I will not give you up to be frozen again. That is wrong. Taeyong and Hana looked at each other. Something passed between them, some silent communication. Then Taeyong spoke again. What is your name, human? Minji. Minji, Taeyong repeated. You have shown us something we have not seen in 10,000 years. You have shown us that compassion still exists. That there are still beings who choose kindness over fear. I am just a healer, Minji said. No, Hana said softly. You are more than that. You are what humans used to be. Before the Empire broke your people. Before they made you forget. Forget what? Minji asked. But before Hana could answer, there was a loud sound outside. A ship was landing near the village. A big ship. Minji looked out the window and saw a massive Imperial battlecruiser settling onto the snow. The Emperor was not taking any chances. He was sending more soldiers. Many more. Minji's hour was running out. Minji looked at the battlecruiser and then back at the two dragons. She had less than an hour now. Less than an hour before the soldiers would attack. She could feel the fear trying to take hold of her heart, but she pushed it away. Fear would not help anyone right now. Are you hungry? She asked Taeyong and Hana. Both dragons looked surprised by the question. Here they were, surrounded by enemies, facing certain death, and this human was asking about food. Yes, Taeyong said after a moment. We have not eaten in 10,000 years. Minji went to her kitchen. She had very little food left after making medicine and feeding the dragons through the night. But she had some vegetables, some dried meat, and herbs. She began making soup. What are you doing? Hana asked, watching her. Making you something to eat, Minji said. You need strength. And I think better when I am cooking. She worked quietly, cutting vegetables and adding them to the pot. The smell of cooking food filled the cottage. Outside, she could hear more soldiers arriving. More boots on snow. More weapons being prepared. But inside, there was just the sound of soup bubbling and the fire crackling. Taeyong and Hana watched her. This human confused them. She should be panicking. She should be crying or begging for her life. Instead, she was making soup. When the food was ready, Minji poured it into 2 large bowls. She brought them to the dragons. They ate slowly, savoring every bite. It was simple food, but it was made with care. They could taste the kindness in it. As they ate, Minji sat down and began to speak. Tell me about yourselves, she said. Who are you really? Why were you frozen? Taeyong finished his soup and set down the bowl. We are old, Minji. Older than the Empire. We remember when dragons and humans lived as partners, not as masters and servants. Partners? Minji asked. I have never heard of such a thing. Because the Emperor's family erased that history, Hana said. Long ago, humans and dragons worked together. Dragons had the power of fire and flight. Humans had something different. Something the dragons called star magic. Star magic. Minji repeated. Yes, Taeyong said. Humans could touch the fabric of space itself. They could create things from nothing. They could heal wounds with a thought. They could communicate across the stars without machines. Dragons were powerful, but humans were magical in a way dragons could never be. Minji shook her head. That cannot be true. Humans have no magic. We are weak. We cannot even fly. You were made to believe that, Hana said softly. The Emperor's ancestor feared human power. So he made a great weapon that put all humans to sleep. When they woke up, their magic was locked away deep inside them. They could not remember how to use it. And their children never learned. We tried to stop it, Taeyong continued. We fought against the Emperor's ancestor. We believed all beings should be free and equal. But we lost. We were betrayed by other dragons who wanted power. They froze us in time and threw us into the mountains. Minji listened to all this. It sounded like a fairy tale. But as she listened, something stirred inside her. A warmth in her chest. A feeling she had never felt before. Why are you telling me this? She asked. Hana looked at her with those silver eyes. Because you saved us, Minji. You saved us with pure kindness, expecting nothing in return. That kind of selfless love is the key. It is what awakens the old magic. I do not understand, Minji said. You will, Hana said. She moved closer to Minji. May I touch you? Minji nodded. She was not afraid. Hana placed one silver claw gently on Minji's forehead. Immediately, Minji felt something change. The warmth in her chest grew stronger. She could see light behind her closed eyes. Bright, beautiful light. Images filled her mind. She saw humans from long ago, glowing with inner light. She saw them shaping stars with their hands. She saw them healing the sick, creating food from air, traveling between worlds with just a thought. She saw dragons and humans working together, building beautiful cities among the stars. Then she saw the darkness come. She saw the Emperor's weapon. She saw humans falling asleep. She saw their light going out. But she also saw something else. She saw that the light was not gone. It was just sleeping, waiting for someone to wake it up. Hannah removed her claw. Minji opened her eyes. She looked down at her hands and gasped. They were glowing. Soft, gentle starlight came from her skin. "What is happening to me?" she whispered. "You are becoming what you were always meant to be," Taeyong said. "A starborn. That is what your ancestors called themselves. Humans who could touch the power of creation itself." Minji stood up. The light grew brighter. She could feel energy flowing through her body. She could sense things she had never sensed before. She could feel the life force of every plant outside. She could sense the fear and confusion of the soldiers surrounding her home. She could even sense the Emperor on his battle cruiser, afraid of what she might become. "This is impossible," she said. "It is your birthright," Hannah told her. "And now that you have awakened, others will begin to wake as well. The magic spreads. It calls to other humans, reminding them of what they are." Outside, Commander Dae-hoon was watching Minji's cottage through his scanner. He saw the energy readings spike. He saw power levels that should not be possible. He contacted the Emperor immediately. "Your Majesty," he said, "the human is changing. She is showing energy readings similar to the ancient texts. I think she is becoming a starborn." On the battle cruiser, Emperor Young-ho watched his screens. He saw Minji glowing with starlight. He had read the old texts. He knew what this meant. If humans could become starborn again, his entire empire would fall. Everything he had would be lost. "Kill her," he ordered. "Kill her now. Kill everyone in that cottage. Use maximum force." Dae-hoon hesitated. He had followed orders his entire life. But something about this felt wrong. He looked at his soldiers. Some of them looked uncertain too. They had all heard the old stories. Stories their grandparents told them. Stories about a time when things were different. "Commander," the Emperor said, "I gave you an order. Follow it, or I will find someone who will." Dae-hoon made his choice. "Yes, Your Majesty." Preparing to attack. Inside the cottage, Minji felt the soldiers preparing to fire. She could sense their weapons charging. She looked at Taeyong and Hannah. "They are going to attack," she said. "Yes," Taeyong said. "We can fight them. We can destroy them all and escape." "No," Minji said firmly. "No more violence. That is what the Emperor wants. He wants us to attack so he can say we are dangerous. So he can say he was right to fear us." "Then what do you propose?" Hannah asked. Minji walked to her door. The light around her body grew brighter. She could feel the power inside her, vast and deep. But she did not want to use it to hurt anyone. She wanted to use it the way her ancestors had. To create. To heal. To show a better way. "I am going to talk to them," she said. "That is suicide," Taeyong said. "Maybe," Minji agreed. "But it is also the right thing to do." She opened the door and stepped outside. The morning sun was bright on the snow. 50 soldiers pointed their weapons at her. Commander Dae-hoon stood at the front, his hand raised, ready to give the order to fire. Minji stood in her doorway, glowing with the light of stars. She looked at all the soldiers. She looked at Dae-hoon. And she smiled. "I am Minji," she said in a clear voice. "I am starborn. And I will not let you take my friends." Commander Dae-hoon stared at the glowing human standing before him. In all his 300 years of service, he had never seen anything like this. Minji's entire body radiated soft starlight. The snow around her feet melted from the warmth of her energy. The air itself seemed to shimmer. "Stand down," Daehoon ordered his soldiers. His voice was uncertain. But before anyone could move, Emperor Youngho's voice came through every soldier's helmet communication system. "Commander Daehoon, you are relieved of duty," the Emperor said. His voice was cold and hard. "All units, open fire immediately. Kill the human and the dragons. That is a direct imperial order." Half of the soldiers hesitated. They looked at each other, confused. But the other half raised their weapons. They had been trained to follow orders without question. "Wait," Daehoon shouted. But it was too late. Plasma bolts fired toward Minji. Bright blue energy streaked through the air. Enough firepower to destroy a building. Enough to kill anything in its path. Minji raised her hands without thinking. The starlight around her body grew brighter. The plasma bolts hit an invisible wall in front of her and simply stopped. They hung in the air for a moment, frozen in time. Then they dissolved into harmless sparks of light that fell like snow. The soldiers who had fired stood in shock. Their most powerful weapons had done nothing. Inside the cottage, Taeyong and Hannah prepared to come out and fight. But they stopped when they saw what happened next. In Snow Peak Village, people began to feel strange. Suho the blacksmith was working at his forge when his hammer started glowing. He struck the anvil and the entire building shook. The metal he was shaping changed form without him even touching it. He stared at his hands in wonder. Jaiwa the teacher was reading to her students when words began to appear in the air above her head. Glowing words that came from her thoughts. The children gasped and pointed. Jaiwa could suddenly feel what every child in the room was thinking. She could sense their emotions, their fears, their hopes. Hyunwoo the old farmer touched a dead plant in his garden, and it burst into bloom. Flowers grew in seconds. Fruit appeared on bare branches. He fell to his knees, tears running down his face. He remembered. He suddenly remembered stories his great-grandmother had told him. Stories about the old days. Stories about star magic. All across the village, humans began to awaken. The light that Minji had ignited spread like ripples in a pond. It touched every human nearby, calling to the sleeping power in their blood. On the battlecruiser, Emperor Youngho watched his screens with growing horror. He could see the energy readings spreading throughout the village. Dozens of humans were awakening. Soon it would be hundreds. Then thousands. "Prepare the main weapon," he commanded. "Target the entire village. I want nothing left. Not one building. Not one human. Not one blade of grass." His officers looked at him in shock. "Your Majesty, there are 3,000 people in that village. Most of them are innocent." "There are no innocents," Youngho snarled. "They are all infected now. If we do not stop this here, it will spread across the entire empire. Do as I command." The officers reluctantly obeyed. The battlecruiser's main cannon began to charge. It was a weapon designed to crack planets. Aimed at one small village, it would leave nothing but a smoking crater. Back on the ground, Commander Daehoon made a decision. He had served the Empire faithfully for 3 centuries. He had followed every order. He had never questioned his commanders. But this was different. This was murder. "All units, stand down," he ordered. "Lower your weapons." "Sir, the Emperor has relieved you," one soldier said. "I do not care," Daehoon said. "I will not murder innocent people. Lower your weapons. That is an order." About half the soldiers lowered their weapons. They trusted Daehoon. They had served with him for years. But the other half kept their weapons raised. They were loyal to the Emperor above all else. "You are all traitors," their squad leader said. He pointed his weapon at Daehoon. "Step aside or die with them." Before Daehoon could respond, the villagers came. Dozens of them, glowing with newfound power. Suho was there, his blacksmith hammer radiating energy. Jaiwoo walked beside him, her eyes bright with inner light. Hyunwoo came too, moving faster than any old man should be able to move. They formed a circle around Minji's cottage. They did not carry weapons. They did not make threats. They simply stood there, protecting their healer, the woman who had always helped them, the woman who had awakened something beautiful inside them. "Stand aside," the loyal soldiers shouted. "This is your last warning." "No," Suho said simply. "We will not let you hurt her." In the sky above, the battlecruiser's weapon finished charging. A beam of pure destruction began to form at its tip. Bright red energy that could destroy anything. Emperor Youngho sat on his throne and smiled. "Fire," he commanded. The beam shot down from the sky. It was wider than Minji's cottage. Wider than the entire village square. As it fell, it screamed like a dying star. Minji looked up and saw death coming. She could feel the terrible power of that weapon. It would kill everyone. Every villager. Every awakened human. Taeyong and Hannah. All of them would die. But she also felt something else. She felt the power of every awakened human around her. Their light called to her light. Their strength joined with her strength. They were all connected now, all part of something larger. Without speaking, without planning, every awakened human in the village reached out. Their power combined. Minji was at the center, but she was not alone. Suho's strength, Jai was wisdom, Hyen was life energy, all of it flowed together. A shield of pure starlight appeared above the village. It was beautiful, like the aurora in the night sky. The Emperor's weapon hit the shield and stopped. The terrible red beam pushed against the shimmering light. The ground shook. The air screamed. But the shield held. The awakened humans poured more power into it. The beam could not break through. Slowly, impossibly, the shield began to push back. It absorbed the deadly energy and transformed it. The red beam turned white, then gold, then into pure harmless light. The light spread across the sky like a sunrise. It was so beautiful that even the loyal soldiers lowered their weapons to watch it. It looked like hope made visible. On the battlecruiser, Emperor Youngho stood up from his throne. "Impossible," he whispered. "This is impossible." But it was happening. The humans had stopped his most powerful weapon. They had not just blocked it. They had transformed it into something beautiful. Taeyong and Hannah stepped out of the cottage. They spread their wings and took to the sky. They flew up toward the battlecruiser, but not to attack. They wanted to talk. They wanted to give the Emperor one last chance. "Youngho," Taeyang's voice boomed across the sky. Every soldier, every villager, every being on the planet could hear him. "You have lost. The old ways are returning. Humans are awakening. You can fight this and destroy yourself, or you can accept change and help build something better." "Never," Youngho shouted. He grabbed the weapon controls himself. "I am the Emperor. I will not bow to humans. I will not share power with inferior beings." He fired again. And again. Beam after beam of destruction rained down on the village. And every single beam was stopped by the shield of starlight. Every attack was transformed into harmless beauty. Inside the battlecruiser, Captain Bora watched her Emperor firing uselessly at the village below. She was old for a dragon, nearly as old as Daehoon. She had served the Empire faithfully. But she had also studied history. Real history, not the lies they taught in schools. She knew about the Starborn. She knew what humans used to be. And she knew that fighting them was not just wrong. It was foolish. "Your Majesty," she said quietly. "Stop. This is madness. We cannot win this fight." "Be silent," Youngho screamed. "I am your Emperor. You will obey me." Bora looked at her crew. She saw the same doubt in their eyes. The same question. Were they really going to murder 3,000 people just to protect one dragon's power? She made her choice. "Emperor Youngho," she said in a formal voice. "By the authority given to me as captain of this vessel, I am relieving you of command. You are no longer fit to lead." Youngho spun around, his eyes wild with rage and fear. "You dare? You dare betray me?" I dare choose what is right over what is ordered, Bora said. She nodded to her security team. Take him to his quarters. Gently. He is still our emperor. But he will not give orders today. As guards escorted the screaming emperor away, Bora opened a communication channel to the village below. This is Captain Bora of the Imperial cruiser. We surrender. Taeyong Hannah, I request permission to land and discuss terms of peace. The battle cruiser landed gently in the snow outside Snow Peak Village. Captain Bora walked down the ramp with her hands raised, showing she carried no weapons. Behind her came a dozen officers, all unarmed. They looked nervous but determined. Taeyong and Hannah landed in front of them. The two ancient dragons stood tall, their wings spread wide. They looked magnificent in the morning sun, scales glittering like precious metals. Captain Bora, Taeyong said. His voice was gentler now. You have made a brave choice. Many would call it treason. Perhaps it is, Bora replied. But I have studied history. I know what happened 10,000 years ago. I know the truth that the Empire tried to hide. If opposing lies is treason, then I am a traitor. Minji walked forward through the crowd of villagers. The starlight around her body had faded to a soft glow, but her eyes still shone with inner power. She looked at Bora carefully. What will happen to the Emperor? Minji asked. That is for you to decide, Bora said. You and the twin dragons. You won this day. You have the power now. We do not want power over others, Minji said firmly. We just want to be free. We want to be treated as equals. Hannah stepped forward. There must be justice, but not revenge. Emperor Youngho has committed terrible crimes. He tried to murder thousands of innocent people today. He has enslaved entire species for his own glory. He cannot remain as emperor. What do you propose? Bora asked. Exile, Taeyong said. Send him to the outer rim, beyond the edge of the galaxy. Give him a ship and supplies. Let him live out his days alone, where his cruelty can harm no one. Bora nodded slowly. That is more mercy than he deserves. But it is just. I will make it so. Over the following days, word of what happened at Snow Peak Village spread across the Empire. The story traveled from world to world, carried by merchants and soldiers, by news broadcasts and whispered conversations. Humans everywhere began to awaken. The process was slow at first. One person here, another there. But each awakening made the next one easier. The starlight called to itself, spreading like dawn across the galaxy. Not all the awakenings were as dramatic as Minji's. Most humans simply felt a warmth inside them, a connection to something larger. They found they could sense emotions more clearly. They could heal small wounds with a touch. They could make plants grow faster or understand animals better. Some dragons were afraid. They saw their power slipping away. They saw humans becoming equals and it terrified them. A few tried to fight. They attacked awakened humans, tried to stop the spread of star magic. But Taeyong and Hannah traveled across the Empire, speaking to both humans and dragons. They told the true history. They showed that partnership was better than domination. They reminded everyone that the galaxy was big enough for all beings to thrive together. Commander Daehoon became one of their strongest allies. He spoke to dragon soldiers everywhere, sharing his own transformation. He had served the Empire blindly for 300 years. Now he saw clearly. He understood that true honor meant protecting the weak, not exploiting them. Many dragons listened. They were tired of the old ways. They had seen the beauty of what Minji and the awakened humans had created. They wanted to be part of something better. Slowly, carefully, a new government began to form. It was called the Council of Balance. Half its members were dragons, chosen for their wisdom. The other half were humans, representing both awakened and unawakened people. Every decision required agreement from both sides. Taeyong and Hannah were offered positions of great power on the council. They refused. They said they had fought one war over control of the galaxy. They would not rule again. Instead, they became advisors, teachers, and guardians of peace. Captain Bora became the first dragon representative on the council. Commander Daehoon joined her. Together, they worked to reform the military, making it a true peacekeeping force rather than a tool of oppression. Humans were given their freedom. Slavery was abolished. Factories were reformed. Fair wages were established. Children of all species learned together in new schools where the true history was taught. It was not easy. Change never is. There were protests and arguments. Some dragons refused to accept the new order and left to form their own colonies far away. Some humans, damaged by generations of slavery, found it hard to trust dragons even when they offered friendship. But slowly, day by day, things got better. 3 months after the confrontation at Snow Peak Village, Minji stood outside her cottage watching the sunset. The small home had been repaired and expanded. It was now a school where she taught both humans and dragons about healing, about compassion, about the old ways of balance. Suho had built the new rooms with his enhanced strength. Jaiwoo had designed the curriculum with her expanded wisdom. Hyunwoo had planted gardens around the building that bloomed with impossible beauty. Taeyong and Hannah came to visit often. Today, they landed in the snow beside her, folding their great wings. "How are your students?" Hannah asked. "Learning quickly," Minji said with a smile. "Both species. The young dragons are fascinated by star magic. The young humans are amazed that they can learn to understand dragon speech." "You have done well, Minji," Taeyong said. "Your one act of kindness changed the entire galaxy." "No," Minji said softly. "I just did what anyone should do. I saw someone who needed help and I helped them. The rest happened because many people made brave choices. Captain Bora, Commander Daehoon, the villagers who stood with me, even the Emperor's crew who refused to keep following evil orders." "Still," Hannah said, "it started with you. You could have left us to die in that ravine. You could have surrendered us to the soldiers. You could have chosen safety over doing what was right. But you did not." Minji looked out at the village. Children were playing in the snow, human and dragon children together. They chased each other and laughed. They did not see differences. They just saw friends. "I had a choice," Minji said. "Everyone always has a choice. Some choices are harder than others. Some cost more. But we always have the power to choose kindness, even when it is difficult." A young human girl ran up to them. Her name was Nari, and she was one of Minji's first students. She was only 7 years old, but she already showed great potential with star magic. "Teacher Minji," Nari said excitedly. "Watch what I learned today." The little girl held out her hands. Starlight gathered in her palms. Slowly, carefully, she shaped it into a small bird made of pure light. The bird spread its wings and flew in a circle around them before dissolving into sparks. "That is beautiful, Nari," Minji said, hugging the child. "You have practiced well." A young dragon landed beside them. His name was Jinwoo, and he was learning healing arts from Minji. He was barely 50 years old, just a child by dragon standards. "Can you teach me that?" he asked Nari. "I want to make a light bird too." "It is hard," Nari said seriously. "But I can show you. We can practice together." The two children ran off, already chattering about techniques and magic. Minji watched them go with warmth in her heart. "This is what it was always meant to be," Taeyong said quietly. "Different species, learning from each other, growing together, making each other better." "Yes," Hannah agreed. 10,000 years we slept in ice, and it took one human with a kind heart to wake us and the whole galaxy." Minji shook her head. "I am not special. Anyone could have done what I did." "But they did not," Taeyong said. "You did. And that makes all the difference." As the sun set, painting the snow in shades of gold and pink, more families came walking past. Dragons and humans together, heading home after a day of work. They waved to Minji. She waved back. The galaxy was not perfect. There were still problems to solve, wounds to heal, bridges to build. But for the first time in 10,000 years, there was real hope. There was the possibility of a future where every being, regardless of species, could reach their full potential. And it had all started because one woman saw two frozen dragons and chose compassion over fear. Minji went back inside her cottage. She had lesson plans to prepare for tomorrow. She had medicines to make for the sick. She had a simple, quiet life full of purpose and meaning. She would never be a queen or a commander. She would never rule planets or command armies. She was just a healer in a small village at the edge of the galaxy. But she had changed the universe. And she had done it the only way that truly matters, one small act of kindness at a time. Outside, stars began to appear in the darkening sky. They shone bright and clear, like promises of a better tomorrow. And somewhere out there, on 1,000 worlds, humans were awakening to their heritage. Dragons were learning to share instead of control. Children of both species were playing together, learning together, building a future together. The age of domination was over. The age of balance had begun. And it would be beautiful.